Irregular migration has been and is still a huge discourse in the German migration policy, especially affecting asylum seekers who in one way or the other immigrate from their countries of origin in search of protection or greener pasture. However, such a policy discourse requires partnership based on the interests of countries of origin, for example, like the Gambia. A new deal between EU countries and some African countries of origin is currently undergoing. A first pilot project initiated by the European Stability Initiative, ESI, that involved the Gambia, a tiny West African state with just 2 million population, perhaps the smallest in the West African or African sub-region. Behind this deal is a migration expert and researcher and head of the European Stability Initiative, Gerald Knaus, who is actually my guest today. Mr. Knaus is also the founder of the 2016 agreement between the EU and Turkey deal, which eventually, many say, failed. However, Mr. Knaus is using more or less similar models for the so-called Gambia-German plan. But why the Gambia? A question so many, especially Gambians, are wondering about. Following a transition in early 2017, the Gambia is no longer a dictatorship with massive human rights violation as it used to be during the autocratic rule of former President Yahya Jammeh. It is a democracy. There is freedom of speech. A democratic parliament, even a truth commission was set up to investigate crimes of the state. This is the so-called ruling of the German government on Gambia as a safe country. Safe zone for asylum seekers, meaning asylum seekers coming from Gambia are not entitled or might not have the opportunity to be regularized because they're coming from safe countries free of crime, dictatorship, or whatever. You're watching the Nyimas Bantaba. My name is Nyima Jadama. Today, thank you for joining us today. In this episode, we will be talking about the current ongoing discussion that have been going on for a few years now. That is the German Gambia plan win-win situation. Many describe it as a migration dilemma on regular access and fast track for return or deportation of Gambian immigrants to Germany. Thank you for joining us once again. Thank you, Mr. Knaus, for joining me. Welcome to Nyimas Bantaba.
Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you. Also joining us online, we have the Director of Diaspora Affairs and Migration at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Gambia, joining us online, Mr. Musa Camara. You're welcome to Nyimas Bantaba, Mr. Camara.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So we start with Knaus first. Mr. Knaus, you've been working on this deal for a few years now. I remember in 2020 or 2021, a team of parliamentarians visited Berlin from Gambia to discuss about this. But then, what prompted you to come up with such? After coming up with a big deal for EU and then all of a sudden targeting Gambia, what is the motive behind this?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot for this invitation and for this opportunity to talk about something that, as you said, my colleagues and myself have been working on since 2019. And to say it right away, we are not very happy about the way things have been developing, particularly in the last year. Why our interest in the Gambia? Well, I mean, you know that there were a few years from 2014, the late years of the dictatorship, until 2017, when tens of thousands of Gambians, young Gambians, crossed the Sahara, went to Libya, and then went to Italy. And of those, many went on to Germany. And the result is that when we, in 2019, talked to the leaders in one of Germany's richest federal units, the federal state of Baden-Württemberg, the Gambians there were the biggest group of asylum seekers who had largely seen their application rejected. And the reason the applications for asylum were rejected was because a lot of them left a country that was a dictatorship, then got stuck in Libya, horrendous torture, abuse. Many died. Then by the time they arrived in Italy and by the time they arrived in Germany, the situation in the Gambia had changed. And so, as you said, today, the courts in Germany say, you do not need to be a refugee from the Gambia. So the problem then was, and I met the leaders of Baden-Württemberg, and I asked them, so what are your major concerns? They said, we don't know what to do about the 15,000 Gambians in Baden-Württemberg. And the theory is, the law says, if you are rejected, you need to be returned. The reality, however, is that first returns are very difficult. They are painful for the individuals. And also, when people have spent already, in some cases, 4, 5, 6 years in Germany or in Europe, I always feel there must be a better way. Yeah. The idea of returning thousands of people is not realistic, nor is it in the interests of Germany, the Gambia, or the Gambians.
Yeah. So you start with your first statement. The thing is, we started this work, I'm quoting you, since 2019, and yes, I'm not happy with what is going on. I'll turn back to Mr. Camara, that is representing the government here. Knaus is saying that he's not happy about what is going on, and this is exactly what many Gambians are saying, even maybe those that are involved. What is holding your government to, from 2019 to date, nothing happens? What is holding you?
Thank you very much, Nyima, for having me on this program, and greetings to Professor Knaus. I have very high regard for him, and he really has the interest of the Gambia and Gambians at heart. I can confirm that. I had about a 1-hour meeting with him discussing on this same subject matter. Now, by that time, 2019, I was not at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I joined the ministry in January 2021. But when I joined the ministry, I knew the efforts he talked about took place. The Gambia government was represented by both the National Assembly and the Executive. Honorable Sidia Jasa led the delegation, and 2 of my colleagues at the Foreign Ministry, the Director of European Affairs and the Director of Diaspora at the time, we are part of the delegation, and they had a very fruitful meeting. Upon return, they submitted a report to the Office of the President, and the report was to be implemented. However, there were some delays. I may not highlight all those reasons here, since different government entities have a role to play in migration management in the Gambia. And we have a national coordination mechanism for migration also that manages and coordinates migration management. So actually what happened was the engagement was supposedly between the Gambia government and the state of Baden-Württemberg. So I think that was one reason it was difficult to implement. It was expected that such a deal diplomatically could be within 2 nation states, that is the Gambia and the Federal Republic of Germany. So I think some misunderstandings about that brought some delay. But over time, the government accepted Professor Knaus' proposal, and it was even discussed at our level early this year. Different institutions responsible for migration were invited to the Foreign Ministry to look at Professor Knaus' proposal again, the Gambia-German breakthrough. And almost the government entirely, that is those representing various government institutions, agreed to 98% of all the proposals made by Professor Knaus. And a summary was made, sent to the presidency. And as we are, a delegation is being prepared. In October, the foreign minister would lead a government delegation. In fact, not government necessarily, but a government delegation, because this delegation will include Honorable Sidia Jata, who is no more a National Assembly member, but being a veteran statesman and also being one that led the initial engagement in 2019, and even the civil society also, the board of directors of Tango, John Charles Njai, I can confirm, had a meeting with my minister last month, and the minister assigned him that. So it's a delegation that would include few ministers, few technicians, serving National Assembly members, 1 or 2, plus Honorable Sidia and the civil society. And that is premised on the guidance and proposal that was drafted by Professor Knaus. And a second move is our president writing directly to the German Chancellor, which was also proffered in Professor Knaus' proposal or plan, which are both being sent. They are yet to be sent, but they are drafted. They're supposed to be sent, followed by this delegation in October. So hopefully, everything will come to fruition. I may not be labor more on the challenges and the reasons why it could not have happened since 2019, but it was a good work he did with good intention, and it was a big opportunity. And in fact, he is a liaison in linking the Gambia to Germany. And even the recent engagement also was propelled by his efforts linking the Gambia government, guiding the Gambian government to re-engage the German government, considering the goodwill we have and also the political environment that currently exists, especially at the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Knaus, at least that's somehow something to start with. I'm not sure if it's a good news or we call it a better news, but at least progress has happened and something is going on. But then, you know, I went through the draft and I'm like, for me, something is missing, something is missing, something is missing, right? And this is, you mentioned in your first statement, the realities. And the realities are, of course, already now, Gambia is marked as safe, so-called safe zone. And in the draft, it's been highlighted as well, almost the same, that those that are here should be able to have access to better integration, work, education, and so on and so on. And those that would be traveling from the Gambia from when pen is put on paper, should be treated at the borders before entering. That means to say if they have access to asylum or not. Now, when one analyzes this and see, now we are saying, okay, Gambians are not entering Germany anymore. This is how I see it, because we both know that in Gambia we have more higher illiteracy rate than literacy rate. And most of these immigrants are from the illiterate backgrounds. And some have been to university but are jobless because we have less industrial or high employment rates. And now going back to the reality again, here, better integration, access to education, and so on. You and I know very well the asylum system in Germany is not, Gambians are not privileged. So where is your point that if they stay here, they will have access to that, when Gambians are still not having access to that? Because one, before you have access to that, you'll have to be regularized. That means you have to have an asylum status, and Gambians are not even having that. Most, 99% of them are not having that. So where is your point?
Well, let me first say that I am very happy to hear from the Foreign Ministry that these steps are taken. And I must confirm that we've had some very good meetings, and I must confirm that over the last 4 years, I've met many people in the Gambia, ministers, people in civil society, refugee activists, who are very interested in changing the status quo. Because perhaps let me just say for a second, what is the status quo? Which is really not good. The status quo has been a situation where a huge number of Gambians died on the route, are still drowning in the sea, had died in Libya, where those who made it after enormous suffering, and the families often having to pay extra money in Libya to get them freed, finally arrive in Europe and then often wait for years with no status or rejected status, and can't actually start doing what they try to do and risk their life to do, which is to earn money for their families and for their future. At the same time, there are no legal routes. Germany is not offering any legal routes, and the worst on top of this is at the moment, the Gambia is the only country in Africa where the European Union has put visa sanctions, so the poor country, the Gambia, needs to pay more for a visa than people in other African countries, and it is becoming much harder to travel legally. So you have less legal travel, no perspective of integration. Many people live in fear of deportations. You have very high number of deportations compared to other African countries from the European Union, and a lot of thousands of people and tens of thousands of relatives in the Gambia that are nervous, that are worried, that don't know what will happen to their loved ones in Germany. In this situation, what we proposed, and what is interesting is how many people in Germany and in the Gambia said, this makes sense. We proposed that there is an agreement, and it has to be between states, although in Germany a lot of responsibility involves the federal unit, so Baden-Württemberg must agree. But if the president actually signs a letter and sends it to the German chancellor and says, why don't we make a bilateral agreement between the Gambia and Germany, where Germany says that those who are now here will get a chance to regularize their status, with the only exception those who committed crimes, but of course that the majority did not commit crimes, right? So those who've been here by now will get a chance, and that would mean once they have a regular status, they can visit their families and they can start integrating.
My point is actually...
And that has never been done before.
Yeah.
No African country has ever achieved that in Germany, that those who arrived irregularly are now here, do not need to live in fear that they will be deported.
But how many Gambians arrive regularly here?
And now very few arrive. So what I'm saying is that this is actually an issue of people who've arrived since 2014, essentially, and who are nervous, and the sooner their status is clarified.
Irregularly or regularly since 2014?
Well, most of them arrived, applied for asylum. That is legal. Everybody has the right to do that. While you apply for asylum, you are in the country regularly. But when your asylum status is rejection, because the Gambia is not a dictatorship, then you are here on a status of toleration, Duldung, which means you're not safe from deportation, right? And while a lot of Germans, when I talk to them, say, well, we understand that if people are engaged in crimes, you know, or sent, then we understand deportation. But those who've been here for 4 years, you know, those who've lived here, some of whom have tried to find jobs, have learned the language, they should not live in fear, right? So, but there's one more thing, which is legal migration. We also propose, so we propose on returns, that there is an agreement that says a certain group is to be returned quickly, but the others do not need to live in fear of deportation. And that is going to be a
certain group is that are going to be returned?
Well, those who've been sent... Well, wait, this is our proposal, right?
Yeah.
So the Gambians, they need to go to the Germans, and the president needs to write to the German chancellor and say, this is what we would like to discuss. But what I can tell you is when the delegation came here that we helped organize with Sidi Ayatta and parliamentarians, and they met German officials, really high level, and talked about this plan, German officials said, this sounds very good. And when the migration envoy, the representative of this German government, in his first interview early this year after he was appointed, was asked about our Gambia plan, he said, Joachim Stamp, that this is a good idea. And he met already some of your diaspora representatives. So the negotiations have to start. This has never happened before, that Germany says we will regularize a bigger group of people as part of such a deal. But other countries have done it. Greece, for example, last year reached a bilateral agreement with Bangladesh, which said that 15,000 temporary residence permits, residence permits were given to nationals from Bangladesh already in Greece who were irregularly and did not need to fear deportation, right? So you can make bilateral agreements, but Germany has never done it. But secondly, we propose that you also introduce regular migration. So as part of such a deal, Germany and the Gambia discuss that from now on, those who come irregularly, people can still apply for asylum. But if they are rejected, the Gambia will take them back very quickly.
Which is high chances that they will be rejected.
Yes,
because if the country is been marked as a safe country, that means there's no need to apply for asylum. Yes. But the thing is, I'm not sure you've still answered my question on the realities, the point that I am talking about, those that are here who has applied for asylum and you call them legal now, but still do not have the refugee status. Because maybe they're not well integrated. And you and I know, to get to this integration procedure, Gambians are not even accessing language courses because they don't have the document.
Yeah, well, let me be very clear.
My point is, I don't just get it. Who is benefiting from this? Well, are we saying is the people who are doing Ausbildung, who already have certain whatever? Just differentiate this for me.
I tell you what we propose, but of course, the issue will be how well your government will negotiate, right?
Yeah.
What we think, however, is that your government has in the last year, there were more deportations, forced returns from Germany to the Gambia than to any other country in Africa. So nobody can say that the Gambia is not cooperating. But even those returns will not and should not lead to thousands of people being returned or deported. So it is in the interests of Germany, and that is where I think your government can come here and confidently say, listen, what we propose is a win-win. If Germany finds a way to integrate and give legal status to as many of the Gambians who are now here as possible, I would say as many as possible, your government needs to negotiate this. I also say that in addition, there needs to be a legal route, because I think that this diaspora in Germany, which didn't exist 15 years ago, now it's very much bigger, right? I mean, there were always some Gambians, but not like now, should be a bridge. You know, people in Baden-Württemberg, which is a state that has a very high need for labor. It's one of the richest parts of the world. Baden-Württemberg is richer than the nation of Sweden. All the industry is there, agriculture is there, services are there. People in Baden-Württemberg can get then qualifications, can find jobs, can create a bridge between one of the most dynamic economies in the world and their home country. And I think if Germany then also says, we offer every year, we offer training in the Gambia, that some people who get this training can work there, others who get this training might then qualify to work in Germany. That there is a legal route, that people who are very ambitious no longer need to get into the boats, risk their life, end up in Libya, end up raped, tortured, abused, that there is a legal link between the German and the Gambia. And I'm very happy about the news, because this is what is needed now, the political signal from the president to the chancellor.
Exactly. Actually, I think this is really, really a more wider discussion, right? Because then if you think of like legal ways, right now, the German embassy in Dakar is not even giving appointment to Gambians. Like, if you go to online, you don't have it. I have projects that I have here.
Right now, there are sanctions. There are, visa policy is EU policy, right?
Exactly. I know this policy is already affecting since last year. You need to wait almost 45 days before you could have a response.
And that's very bad.
Which is very bad. Yeah. So, for example, this year, I have 2 projects that I am running, and we bring people here. There's nothing online. We wrote to the embassy. Nothing happens. And the second one, which is happening in October, it's like we're even scared. We don't even know how to go about this. And now we have you sitting here. We have the government telling us legal ways to apply for visa. I don't know, but I'll cut you short there.
Can I just say one thing? Of course, what I'm saying requires an agreement. The agreement requires the end of sanctions. The agreement requires clarity, legal ways, regularization. But what frustrated me and my colleagues was that there were so many good people in the Gambia, in the civil service, in civil society. I met many ministers. I met 2 ministers of interior. I met, a minister of youth.
So that means all this sanction is based until the agreement is done, then we should talk about whatever.
The sanctions are decided by the EU, right? But what we need is Germany, as one of the biggest countries in the EU, to actually say, listen, these sanctions, this is not our policy. We don't want this. We want a win-win agreement. Win-win-win, win for the migrants.
Will this affect the EU policy?
Of course. I mean, Germany can then. That's why I say if Greece can
let me call you there and go to Musa. Musa, we've been talking about, like he said, which is also a question that I was going to ask. Germany has deported more Gambians than any other African country, let's say, since Barrow, the current president, took over to date. Like over 200 has been deported. Yet still, Germany proposed a so-called win-win situation to the Gambia, which Gambia seems like to be playing through this. If yes, are you going to sign this, or what agreement are we looking forward to? Because it's like, from what I'm understanding from Mr. Knaus, is that I've done my job. Now you have the final decision to decide. What are we looking forward to? Are you really going to play around it?
Yes, that's why I said when the government officials met to look at Professor Knaus' plan, it was 98% endorsed, meaning there's 2% reservation. Just to digress a bit, I concur with everything he has said. It's very possible, pending and the Gambia. So at that level, the agreement would supersede all other protocols that may hinder the reintegration or regularization of Gambian migrants in Germany. And the other issue is, if you look at the two engagements right now, it seems they're going in tandem. The reason EU has sanctioned the Gambia, as Professor mentioned, was because we were considered not cooperating to receiving or readmitting rather, our citizens. And based on that reason, we were given two sanctions. It's like double layers sanction that the Gambia is currently undergoing. Now, we've complied. We've been receiving our nationals based on the capacity that we could handle, contrary to what you proposed within the operational conclusions of the good practices agreement or good practices document between the two parties, which proposed 4 flights a month, meaning a flight of 25 Gambian nationals each week. And the Gambia did not have the capacity to receive this. We knew the challenges it was going to bring to us. Currently, how many youth do we have that are unemployed? Bringing this number, security threats, considering the trauma they underwent, the route they used going through the desert, the trauma they underwent in Libya, as Prof mentioned. I was in Libya, I saw how migrants fared there, crossing the Mediterranean, how many lost their lives, those that escaped or those that were able to enter into Europe. Considering all that trauma, bringing them back, how much is that going to affect them? How much is that going to affect their families? So these were capacity challenges we have as a government, and it was difficult to cooperate. But over time, we had meetings, we had assessments to look at this readmission arrangement, and the capacity we had to receive was 1 flight of 25 nationals, which started in June after we lifted the moratorium in March 2022. So in June, we had about 22 returnees. July, we had 19. September, we had 25. And November, we had 25. Oh. So that was all we had for 2022. That came through non-scheduled flights, which is a number less than 100. So there are a few that came with chartered flights, at most 2 per chartered flight. So in total, we had about 130 that were repatriated in 2022 by our records. So it's not actually 200 in 2022. In 2023, because we had joint working group meetings between the two parties. So in October, we reviewed, and it was agreed to have 2 flights maximum in the month of 25 nationals each. But practically, it was 35 Gambian nationals per flight instead of 225 for a greater part of 2020. For the first quarter, starting February. Yeah, February. February was 35. Then March was 35. Then in May, May was 35 too. So the 2 flights started in July. Yeah, the 2 flights started in July. July we had 2 flights, and August also is supposed to be 2 flights. So that's the number we've been receiving. And based on this cooperation or compliance, we expected in return, EU is supposed to lift the sanction. Yes, some may think the sanction affect government officials, but in reality it doesn't, because the government officials are traveling on official missions without being rejected, but it's the citizens that it is affecting. Yeah. Yes. Not the civil servant, it's the citizens that it has been affecting. And we are receiving complaints from the citizens. EU met, the council met, because the commission, DG Home, advised this, or let me say the commission advises the council. The council met in June. We expected the visa sanction should have been lifted. It hasn't. So we have 2 moments expecting, that is October and December. So we expect the sanction should be lifted by that time. If twice. We cannot be cooperating, readmitting our citizens that do not have any legal authorization or that do not that exhausted their legal remedies to stay, and the sanction is still on the country. What I'm saying here is by October, while the Republic of Germany bilaterally, at the EU level also we expect this sanction would have been lifted, or latest at least December. So in that case, we would not be under any sanction, and bilaterally.
Meaning from now on to December,
both
citizens.
Germany or the EU member states have a shared competence when it comes.
Your internet is breaking. I don't know if it's raining in Gambia again, because their network is always bad if it's raining. So what I'm saying is, meaning Gambian citizens might not have the opportunity to even have a visa appointment from the German embassy in Dakar to come to, to Germany till end of December. Right, that means if the sanction is not lifted, Gambian citizens might not have the opportunity.
No. It doesn't mean that. The issue of appointment generally is difficult. What causes that, I don't know. But to all EU member states, to have appointment is difficult. But having appointment and the issuance of visa are 2 different things.
Yes.
There is a procedure or process, how long it takes when visas are applied before feedback is given, how much it costs. This is where the issue is. But in terms of having the appointment, that has nothing to do with the sanction. We understand some people are making it difficult, like you said. All the embassies, all EU member states, or let's say, yes, almost all EU member states are based in Dakar. That covers the Gambia, or that covers the Gambia. So Gambians traveling to any EU member state would have to travel to Dakar. So there's this feeling some people may be working with the embassy officials are making it difficult because they're creating opportunities for people to go through the back door to give them money to facilitate appointments for them. Because an ordinary appointment should be readily available to anybody who wants to. But where the sanction applies is the period it takes for the visa to be processed, and also the cost, and also possibly whether the visa will be issued or not.
Yeah, actually,
But
yeah, actually, the issue of the sanction is just the slightest point in the whole interview. But then online, there is really nothing available for appointment first. But then I just wanted to ask, like, Mr. Knaus was really emphasizing, the whole draft is actually like a win-win situation for both Gambia and Germany. I was wondering, is your government seeing this really as a win-win situation? If yes, what aspect do you see that really Gambia is benefiting? And yes, we are convinced enough that we're going to put pen on paper.
Yes, he's right. It's going to be a triple win. In fact, he said that earlier, not 2 wins, but triple win. Win for the Gambia, win for Germany, and win for the migrant. Considering what he's saying, and like you rightly mentioned, most of the Gambian migrants around Baden-Württemberg have their asylum applications rejected. So this deal is going to be an agreement between the 2 parties that Gambian migrants who are irregular and currently residing in Germany and have not committed any crimes to be legalized or to be regularized or integrated. So that's an opportunity Gambians have. And again, it saves the lives of our youth that are perished either on the desert or in the sea, or at the Libyan detention camps. Because now it would be clear to Gambians that this deal has been reached. All Gambians, Gambian migrants that are in Germany since 2017 to date and have not committed crimes would be integrated. And henceforth, whoever enters the EU border, gets to Germany and has asylum, his or asylum application rejected, will be returned. So those knowing they do not qualify for asylum protection would not take the risk journey going that far. We've seen a good number a couple of years back returning from Niger, from Morocco, from Libya, from Tunisia. The intention is to travel to Europe, but because of the difficulties they've been encountering and the less hope they have in succeeding, they decide to return home voluntarily. So this is similar because it becomes difficult now when they are within the EU jurisdiction, have spent a couple of years there, have some hope, and now you want to return them. But at that initial moment, it becomes easy. So, but this is a point that the government also hasn't agreed yet. This is why I said when the government officials looked at Professor's proposal, there was 90% agreement. This is an area that wasn't agreed, and also to return those that have committed crimes. So these are areas we have to discuss again and finalize and come with a common position as a government, and then engage the EU. Engage Germany rather. Germany has already opened an embassy in the Gambia. The Gambia also will be opening
a consulate, Mr. Camara. It's really not a consulate from my understanding.
Not a consulate.
But why are Gambians going to Dakar to apply for visa? There is no visa section. So for us, an embassy without a visa section, that is just for government to government.
Yes. No.
Politically.
No, what people do not understand is.
Yeah.
What people do not understand is the German office in the Gambia was a liaison office.
Yeah.
The Spanish have Spanish antennas. The French also have a liaison office. Now the German liaison office has been upgraded to an embassy. It was opened by the German Federal Minister for External Affairs. She was in the Gambia. What happened? Embassies are established to strengthen diplomatic ties. And at the same time, they could serve consular services. So they do not just start diplomatic relations and then offer consular services as well. This is why governments are still going to Germany, to Dakar, when they need consular services. So the German embassy is not a consul; it's an embassy, but not yet offering consular services that will come over time. Just like the Moroccan embassy was opened in the Gambia, they started consular services in September. So in the beginning, all they deal with are diplomatic relations and diplomatic activities. So that should be clear to your audience, that it's an embassy, but yet to offer consular services, yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure my Unfall, how do you say it? For most of us, it's really not an embassy, because if you have to travel extra, that requires extra resources and so on. That means it's just there for the interest of the government, politically, bilaterally, but not for the citizens. However, that's another thing. But before you come there, die irreguläre Migration afrikanischer Einwanderer, insbesondere gambischer Einwanderer, nach Europa und Deutschland einzudämmen, ist eine Alternative erforderlich. Ein Plan, der für beide Seiten von Vorteile sein könnte. Diese alternative Strategien sollte jedoch schnell und qualitativ hochwertig Verfahren zur Bestimmung des Asylstatus an das EU-Außengrenzen einführen und natürlich, sobald sie in Deutschland angekommen sind, auch mit einer schnellen Rückführung oder Abschiebung nach einem abgelehnten Asylverfahren oder dem Zugang zum Flüchtlingsstatus kombiniert werden. Die Gambia-German Win-Win-Situation wird als alternative Strategien weitergeführt. Allerdings ist oder scheint der Deal umstritten. Aber was wäre eine bessere Alternative gewesen als das, was in dem Entwurf vorgeschlagen wird, fragen sich viele Gambier, vor allem Migrantinnen in Deutschland. Hinter diesem Deal steht der Migrationsforscher und Leiter der Europäischen Stabilitätsinitiative, Gerald Knaus. Er ist auch der Begründer oder Erfinder des 2006 geschlossenen Abkommens zwischen der EU und der Türkei, der auch letztlich scheitert. Herr Knaus verwartet jedoch ein mehr oder weniger ähnliches Modell für den sogenannten Gambia-Deutschland-Plan. Wir sind bei der Nyimas, Bantaba, und mein Gast sind Herrn Knaus. Wir reden über seinen neuen Plan für Gambia und Deutschland, der er so als Win-Win-Situation nennt. Mr. Knaus, nochmal. So again, like if you look at the whole thing, 2016, you find a similar model like this, which is really big, EU and Turkey, but eventually fail. And it's like nothing concrete has come out of this from now to date, but you are still hopeful that there would be a conclusion because there could be a better alternative from what I got to gather. And then all of a sudden, Gambia. Why Gambia? Most people are saying, yeah, because it's the smallest, it's easy to convince. This is for your own interest from what is coming from people. If you should get the Gambia deal done, then you would win the trust of not the German government, but to EU, and then you will get up to your feet again. It's like getting up your grounds. Is that so?
No, because I think there's a big misunderstanding in what you described. The agreement between the European Union and Turkey was proposed by Turkey, right? I mean, you know that on the 8th of March 2016, the Turkish Prime Minister, and I had many meetings with the Turks, came to Europe, and in the Turkish embassy in Brussels, he said, this is what Turkey puts on the table.
Yeah.
And it was the Turkish proposal because Turkey at that time wanted certain things from the EU. It wanted visa-free travel, which no African country at the moment has, and Turkey still doesn't have. It wanted visa-free travel in 6 months. And the EU at that time actually said, well, if you meet certain conditions, you get it in 2016. It wanted 6 billion euros for the millions of refugees in Turkey, which it got. The 6 billion euros, the biggest amount of money the EU ever gave to a third country, has been spent now. So it's been found and it was spent. It also wanted that the EU takes refugees from Turkey in a legal way. The EU has taken from Turkey around 40,000 refugees, and it returned to Turkey around 2,500. And Turkey agreed then that it would take back Syrian refugees. This was never about Turks, so it was very different from the Gambia agreement.
Yeah.
And it worked for 4 years until the moment when the Turks said, okay, will the EU continue to support us financially? And there were some in the EU, and it was a huge mistake, who sort of thought, well, perhaps not. And then the Turks said, well, listen, if you don't support us, then the deal doesn't work anymore. So after 4 years, it was Turkey that proposed it was Turkey that called it off. And that is, there's a very important lesson here. The only kind of agreements that can work, we know from 20 years of experience, are those that are in the interests, not just of the EU, but also of the other country. So that's why I went to the Gambia 3 times. I went to the parliament. I discussed with Sidia Yatta and Mr. Tunkara, who were on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and with the Gambian Youth Council, with refugee organizations and others, to ask them what deal would be in your interest. Because here is the thing that is important in these negotiations. Germany only wins if the agreement with the Gambia is so good for the Gambia that other African countries come then and say, we want this too. The Gambia is small, so in a way, with the Gambia, it is easier for Germany, because although for Germany the numbers are actually big, because so many are in Baden-Württemberg, but it is not a big country. Now imagine negotiating with Nigeria.
That's what I was,
yes.
Why not target Nigeria and Gambia?
Well, because actually we have an interest, and there is a huge opportunity here. We have a government in Baden-Württemberg, which is an area of the world which actually needs employment. We have a new democracy in the Gambia, which I think Germany and Europe should do everything to support. You know, I was always against these sanctions, I should say it openly. We wrote against it. We warned and we wrote against it. We also think that a country like the Gambia cannot develop in isolation. So the idea of such an agreement cannot be to stop all migration in the future. It should be that in the future migration is possible legally. And in a way, this would then be a pilot project that would have to be in the interests of both sides for a new paradigm, a new way of working with Africa. The coalition agreement of this government, and a lot of the ideas, I wrote a book and I was invited to the coalition talks. I met all the negotiators. I presented there and I suggested to this government coalition to offer much more legal mobility. The fact that you wait so long for a visa appointment is, one, lack of resources in the consulates, and secondly, political. You know, it's an idea to, you know, send a signal. I think Europe has an interest in more travel of Africans, has an interest in more Africans working in Europe.
Actually, I'm still not, honestly, to be quite honest with you, I'm still not convinced. Now, for example, in sometime in, I think, February or March, we had a meeting with some government officials, mostly BMZ's Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Interior, and so on a different project, because now I work more on a global perspective and across Africa. We call it the 360 mobility, also on legal traveling, actually not just Gambia, but for all. And then I had a side conversation with some BMZ officials because I had projects. We had a project that phased out, funded by BMZ, but they still don't somehow, I'm not sure if they don't want to renew it or not. So I had this opportunity to speak to one of the officials, and I was shocked. He was like, BMZ is phasing out of Gambia. We are going to, for example, Ghana. I'm like, why? He's like, let's be honest to each other. There is nothing in Gambia. So me, I'm like, okay, if BMZ, a whole government, is phasing out a very, very important institution of the German government is phasing out, all the institutions are phasing out, yet we talk about a deal that is not telling us they are building XYZ or doing XYZ, but is encouraging to regularize those that are here or give them opportunities and return more. I'm still not convinced.
Well, I mean, you can, the proposal we made is online.
Yeah.
And one of the first points we said in there, and that was presented by the Honorable Sidi Ayata and by Mr. Tunkara and by the delegation, when they came to Germany, one of the issues, and we visited the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we visited the Ministry of Finance, we visited the Ministry of Development. Everywhere they said one of the things they would like to have in the agreement is that the Gambia becomes a priority country for support, like Senegal. Senegal has been a priority country for German development. The Gambia was not. But I think one issue is very important for your viewers to understand. What we are proposing does not exist at the moment. Yeah, at the moment, you have sanctions against the Gambia.
Yeah.
So that's why earlier this year, I talked to officials, I talked to people in civil society, I talked to ministers, and I sent the proposal. I said, listen, if your president sends a letter to the German chancellor and says, we want to discuss something better, we want to discuss what Sidi Ayata and Mr. Tunkara and others started in 2000 and what has not led to an agreement, we want an agreement now. Because the status quo, where all the things you describe are a consequence of a status quo which is bad. It's lose, lose, lose. Mm-hmm. Lose for migrants, lose for the Gambia, and lose for Germany. So I actually think it's very encouraging to hear from Mr. Camara that the president is seriously, I hope it will happen soon, before the delegation, is seriously saying we want to discuss this. I think it is very good if then a very well-prepared delegation, and there are people in the Gambia who know the issues really well, I hope they are all part of the delegation, will come. We, I think civil society, both in Germany and Gambian civil society, will then need to explain to people what this is about so that it's all very transparent, but also needs to push. We need a different relationship between African democracies, and that is what the Gambia is today, and European democracies, including legal mobility.
Including legal mobilities. Mr. Camara, most Gambians, especially those in the diaspora, believe that the bill, if enacted, might actually do more damage than expected in terms of returning or not even allowing Gambians to enter Germany. Yet still your government is somehow muted about this issue. It's not making any sensitization to the public about what is going on, what they need to do, because we're talking about the diaspora, but our parents and families are in Gambia. So my family would be worried or interested to know what my status quo would be in Germany, for example, if I should fall under such a situation. So if the Gambian civil society doesn't know what is going on, not every diaspora, and I would say 99% of the diaspora doesn't know the content of what is being pushed. And all of a sudden, there is an agreement, like the good practice document. There was an agreement. People are saying it was signed, it's not signed, this is what it entails, because the government doesn't make any sensitization about it. What is your government doing in terms of informing your citizens, both the diaspora and in the Gambia, to make sure they know what is going on?
Yes, I'll go back to the, I'll start with the good practices you mentioned. Then sensitizations on the good practices. There were occasions when the government had interfaces with the journalists, with media houses to discuss about these good practices. So it's nothing hidden or nothing secretive. And even recently, my minister held a press briefing where it was discussed. But additionally, this engagement was also discussed. One thing is clear, that as a government, you cannot come up and announce what you've not finalized. So that is a reason the government has not been communicating about this, because the government has to take a position itself on this. And as Prof mentioned earlier, the engagement started since 2019, but there are issues that it could not have been finalized. So if we reach to a level where the government has seen it as the way forward, of course, our citizens will be engaged. And even the new law that Germany currently has, that gives opportunity to migrants to regularize their status, also has been discussed. And we expect Gambian migrants to present themselves forward for that. It's a little different from
that is dangerous. That is dangerous. We don't encourage Gambians to present themselves for that, because there are so many pros and cons. The reality is that most of them do not have that. And if you should present yourself, that means you will have to give your Gambian passport. And if you did, the next thing is deportation. So I don't know. It's a whole...
The issue is whether you give your Gambian passport or not. The Germans know who are Gambians and who are not, because when they applied for asylum, they cited the country they come from.
Yeah, but they can never deport you without a passport. Yeah, they don't deport without a passport unless your government issue a laissez-passer.
Yeah, the issue is this is an opportunity. It is a law. It's not fake. So there are requirements to fulfill to be eligible for it. So we expect those that are qualified to apply. The requirements do not have committed any crime.
Yeah, Knaus wants to say something. Yeah, Mr. Knaus wants to say something. Try to make it so we have 5 minutes to go.
Well, I'll make it short. I just want to say when I mean, I talk to media in the Gambia many times. I also talk to diaspora organizations. The very first thing I did was to meet with the Gambian associations here in Germany.
You haven't met the Berlin Association?
No, but I mean, in Baden-Württemberg, we had many meetings, including when we came with the delegation. We had a meeting, a presentation in Stuttgart. I met with people in Lörrach, Yaya Sonko. I've been on his show many times, but most importantly, the members of parliament, Mr. Tunkara, Mr. Yatta, also met with the diaspora in Germany. The trouble is, and you've heard it, because there is no negotiations at the moment on the agreement, you hear there is some talk of an agreement, but you don't see it. You only have our proposal.
Yeah.
But what is very, very important is it has to be transparent. That's why we publish everything that we write. After every trip, I talk about it. The most important thing is that the status quo that you describe, that you suffer from, or all Gambians suffer from, you know, it's difficult to get a visa, it's difficult to travel, there's a lot of uncertainty, is bad for everyone. So
actually, I was lucky. It took me just less than 3 days to have my visa, but we are talking about other people as well. I mean, and this was like 2015. We're talking about now. It's not about me. It's about those that are there who wants to travel legally and not stay, but come purposely for something and go back. So we've been doing this since like 2 years ago, but since this year, like nothing is happening, and it's a bit frustrating because they're not staying, they're going back home. But we would engage you guys to see how best, because you find no appointment online, and you cannot even apply for a visa if you don't have an appointment. So this is frustrating. We have like 4 minutes to go. So it's been amazing. Like personally, I have learned a lot, but like you said, it's just a draft and this is online. What you read is what you see, is what you understand. That's why I've been really looking forward to talking to you, side of the government, to hear from them. Then we have a better understanding, at least, because honestly, I'm still not convinced in the sight of the realities it involves for people that would be here, that would be our potential Gambians that are already here, who we said should have access to integration and so on. Yes.
I heard from very senior members of the German government already a few months ago that if the Gambian president sends a letter, if there is a signal that the Gambia wants to negotiate this, what Sidi Ayata started, that then immediately the migration envoy here should travel to the Gambia. You know, that immediately there is the kind of contact which we have been missing, because time really matters. I met many Gambians who were very worried, who've been 5 years in Baden-Württemberg, who some of them even learned the language and started. But
some of them got deported while going to school. Yeah, I have friends, I have colleagues.
Absolutely. And
it's really a sad
situation. And you believe me, we've been saying for a very long time, my colleagues and myself, and it's in the coalition agreement also, deportations are always a tragedy, and you should find a way that you discourage, that you have alternatives. You also have a tragedy if a lot of people get on boats and die, so you want to discourage irregular migration, but through strong signals and legal ways.
Discouraging irregular migration is what one of our projects, the Migrant Media Network, has been doing in the Gambia, sponsored by the German government, where we do sensitization about irregular migration through social media and community engagement, have mentors to provide informations and opportunities in Germany by applying visa or coming to Germany legally, done in a very regular way. So I hope that project would go on. Mr. Camara, your final word. Thank you so very much for your time, for joining us all the way from Gambia despite your schedule. What would be your final word? Maybe in 30 seconds, because we have like less than 2 minutes to wrap up.
Yes, I will suggest you use your platform to sensitize Gambian migrants in Germany to present themselves for the new law on residential permit, especially those who qualified for it. They shouldn't hesitate. I see no reason they should be discouraged not to. And this will reduce the number of Gambians who will be pending and being irregular for the government negotiation to also take care of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Knaus, what would be your last word? Maybe you could also do a Kurzzusammenfassung auf Deutsch, so that damit unsere deutsche...
Ja, ich glaube, das Allerwichtigste ist, wir haben hier eine junge Demokratie. Wir haben durch diese Migration zum ersten Mal eine wirklich tiefe Verbindung zwischen einem Teil Deutschlands, Baden-Württembergs und Gambia. Und wir müssen daraus etwas Positives bauen. Die Angst der Leute wegnehmen, Beziehungen aufbauen, legale Migration ermöglichen. Visa müssen schneller vergeben werden, sie müssen billiger werden, nicht teurer. Und dafür brauchen wir jetzt Verhandlungen. Und ich glaube, es gibt in Gambia Politiker, die das verstehen. Und jetzt muss eigentlich nur der Präsident sagen, er will diese Verhandlungen. Und dann beginnen die und hoffentlich kommt es schnell zu einem Win-Win-Win.
To a win-win situation. We're just waiting on the President Barrow to say, yes, I am going to do this, but be super careful before you just say, yes, I am going to do this in the interest of Gambia, not just in the interest of politicians or the government. That's all we have for you. Das war's von unserer heutigen Sendung von Nyimas Bantaba. Wir haben über das Thema Gambia-Deutschland-Plan oder Win-Win-Situation gesprochen, also mit der Erfinder der EU-Türkei-Deal, aber auch die gambische German Plan, auch Herrn Knaus. Dabei war auch online die Direktor für Diaspora und Migration von des Auswärtigen Amts Gambia. Vielen Dank, das war's von heutiger Sendung von Nyimas Bantaba. Mein Name ist Nyima Jadama. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.